They came for my land with forged papers and polished smiles, thinking I'd be too old, too tired, or too proud to fight. What they didn't know was that I had been forged by this land in ways they couldn't begin to understand. I'm Caleb Mercer, third-generation farmer, son of the prairie, and the dirt under my boots? It's not just soil, it's the blood of my family. So when the Silver Ridge Estates HOA claimed they'd bought my property, they didn't just steal from me. They declared war. It all began on a Wednesday. One of those quiet Missouri mornings where the sky stretches so wide it makes you feel small, and the wheat dances like it's humming a tune only the land can hear. I was sipping coffee on my porch, watching the golden rose ripple in the wind like waves, when my phone buzzed on the railing. "Caleb, it's Jonathan. You need to get down to the county office. Now." His voice didn't match the calm of the morning. It was clipped, urgent. "What's going on?" I asked, still staring at the sun rising over my crops. "They filed it. The HOA, they claim they bought your land." I thought he was joking. "That's impossible. I never sold a damn thing. They don't even have jurisdiction out here. You need to see this for yourself." 30 minutes later, I was standing in the fluorescent hell of the county records office, the smell of dust and ink filling the air as Jonathan laid a stack of papers in front of me. I flipped through them, all rising in my throat. Transfer of ownership. Parcel 12A through 14C. Total acreage, 1,500 acres. Seller, Caleb Mercer. Buyer, Silver Ridge Estates HOA. And there it was, my name, my signature. Only it wasn't. "That's not my signature," I muttered, heart pounding. "They forged this." Jonathan's jaw clenched. "And it gets worse. They've already sold it to Palladium Ventures. Construction is set to begin in 30 days. It felt like someone had taken a shovel to my gut. My family had tilled this land before the town even had streetlights. My grandfather had broken his back clearing this field with nothing but a mule and a dream. My father had built the barn with his own hands, beam by beam. And now, they wanted to pour concrete over it? Not on my watch. Who signed off on this? I asked, already knowing the answer. Jonathan tapped a name with his pen. Karen Holbrook, HOA president. The notary? Her husband. Of course. Karen Holbrook had been a thorn in my side for years. She was the kind of woman who thought a homeowners association badge gave her the authority of God, always sending letters about how my tractor kicked up too much dust or how my windmill clashed with the visual harmony of her pastel prison blocks. I ignored her, figured she was harmless. I was wrong. "I want every document related to this," I told Jonathan. "Every meeting, every signature, every fake memo they filed." He nodded. "It won't be easy. They're not going to back down. They don't have to. I'm not giving them the chance." That night, I pulled out the old family safe buried beneath floorboards in my office and opened it for the first time in years. Inside were 3 generations worth of land deeds, tax records, and handwritten notes. I found the original deed, the one my grandfather had received in 1956 when he bought the first 1,500 acres. It was still crisp, the paper thick and slightly yellowed, like parchment from another time. But that wasn't all I found. Buried deep inside a worn manila folder was a document I had never noticed before, a transfer agreement from 1982, when my father formally inherited the land. On the last page, in faded ink, was something I'd never seen, a second parcel. Parcel 18C, 300 additional acres. Unregistered, undeclared, untouched. My hands trembled as I unfolded an old county map and cross-checked the parcel number. It sat north of our original land, just beyond a dried creek bed, and directly beneath the current expansion of Silver Ridge Estates. The HOA hadn't just stolen from me. They had built their empire on my soil. By the time I stood up from that desk, the tremble in my hands was gone, replaced by something colder, sharper. They thought I was just a farmer. But I wasn't just going to take back what they stole. I was going to take everything. In the weeks that followed, Caleb Mercer played the role of the defeated man. He showed up at Silver Ridge HOA meetings, dusty boots tracking across the clean tile floors of the community center, his face twisted in the perfect performance of frustrated impotence. He shouted about injustice, demanded answers, thrust forged documents in the air like a man clutching his last hope. Karen Holbrook, perched at the head of the table in her tailored cream blazer and HOA-issued name tag, would respond with a smirk so practiced it could have been sculpted from stone. Behind her, The rest of the board nodded solemnly. Carl Holbrook, Treasurer James Spaulding, Secretary Grace Tompkins, each of them drunk on the false power they believed they wielded. They thought he was beaten. That was the entire point. While they mocked him in meetings and sent out letters to residents calling him a disgruntled landowner, Caleb was working behind the scenes like a surgeon preparing for an operation. Every night, while the HOA members slept soundly in homes built on land that didn't belong to them, he pored through zoning records, land transfer filings, and HOA minutes. That's when he found it. A meeting transcript from 4 years ago, before Silver Ridge expanded into what used to be wild grassland along the northern edge of the property. Buried inside was a brief exchange, just a few sentences, between Karen and Carl, discussing an unverified parcel boundary. Grace had raised concerns. Karen had shut them down. "Legal's looking into it," Karen had said. "We'll get it squared away later." They never had. It was everything Caleb needed. A mistake. A documented moment when they acknowledged there might be a problem and plowed forward anyway. That changed everything from incompetence to negligence. From negligence to deliberate fraud. He didn't stop there. He went door to door in the disputed section of Silver Ridge. At first, homeowners wouldn't even open their doors to him. Some peeked from behind blinds. Others left HOA flyers taped to their windows like talismans of protection. But then came Lisa Callahan. Lisa had lived in Silver Ridge for 6 years and had been on the receiving end of Karen Holbrook's pettiness for just as long. Her crime? Planting sunflowers taller than the 6-foot regulation height. When Caleb explained what he'd found, her hand shook. "You mean, my house might not even be built on land I actually own?" "That's exactly what I mean." Lisa didn't need convincing. She'd kept every fine, every notice, every threatening letter. She handed him a file 2 inches thick and promised to spread the word. Within days, more homeowners joined her, quietly at first, then openly. Then came the real gift, the developer. Jonathan had dug into the finances behind Silver Ridge's expansion, and what he found made Caleb feel like he had just struck oil. The land sale had been fast-tracked. Environmental surveys had been skipped. Zoning variances waved through with backdated signatures. And worst of all, the developer, an out-of-state firm named Palladium Ventures, had already leveraged the projected value of the expansion to secure massive construction loans. Which meant that if Caleb's ownership claim on the 300-acre overlap held, the project wouldn't just stall, it would implode. And Palladium would be looking for someone to blame. Still, Karen didn't see the storm coming. She doubled down, ordering new development signs and holding groundbreaking ceremonies on land that was legally still Caleb's. She even mailed Caleb an official cease and desist letter, accusing him of trespassing on Silver Ridge property. Caleb laughed out loud when he read it. Then he sent Jonathan a message. "It's time." The next morning, Caleb filed an official ownership dispute with the county. Thanks to the inheritance clause from 1982, the land's lineage was airtight. Within 48 hours, every title in the affected zone was flagged. Banks froze refinancing applications. Home sales halted. Title insurance companies issued alerts. It was like someone had poured glue into the gears of the entire community. Homeowners who had once ignored Caleb's presence were now pounding on HOA doors demanding answers. Karen Holbrook went dark. The HOA's official response was a poorly worded newsletter email to residents insisting the matter was temporary and under legal review. But the panic had already begun to seep into every foundation, every mortgage, every dinner conversation at the dinner tables of Silver Ridge. That's when Caleb dropped the hammer. He filed a civil lawsuit against the HOA, its board, and Palladium Ventures for fraudulent acquisition, property theft, and willful deception. The suit was massive, backed by historic deeds, notarized records, and testimonies from early residents like Lisa. The story caught fire. Local media showed up at Caleb's front gate with cameras. Real estate agents called in a frenzy. The title company's legal counsel contacted Jonathan directly, asking if settlement was even possible. But Caleb wasn't interested in settlement. He wanted something more permanent. He wanted Silver Ridge erased. By the end of the month, the HOA was in freefall. Karen stopped appearing at meetings. Carl resigned for health reasons. Grace moved out of state. And the last remnant of their once smug authority, those perfectly polished HOA signs at the neighborhood entrance, were suddenly graffitied with one word. Thief. Caleb stood at the edge of his land one evening, watching as a foreclosure sign went up on the Holbrooks' home. His fields swayed in the evening wind, the same as they had for generations. The same as they would tomorrow. He smiled. They had taken his land. Now he was taking everything. The illusion of peace cracked on a Thursday. The residents of Silver Ridge Estates woke to find their inboxes flooded with certified emails from the county clerk's office. Each message was cold, bureaucratic, and terrifying. Notice of property ownership dispute. The deed associated with your property is now under formal review due to a legal claim regarding prior ownership of the land. Until the matter is resolved, all property transactions, refinancing, and structural development are frozen. It spread like a virus: emails, letters, whispers across fences, panicked posts on the neighborhood forum. And behind it all, the growing, suffocating dread that everything they thought they owned wasn't really theirs. Exactly as Caleb had planned. He didn't watch the chaos unfold from a distance. He watched from his truck, parked just off the main road, as residents gathered at the HOA office that morning. Dozens stood in clusters, gripping printouts and mortgage papers like lifelines. Their faces shifted between confusion and fury, most of them already suspecting the truth but too afraid to say it aloud. Inside the HOA building, the board was unraveling. Karen Holbrook hadn't shown her face since the night before, too cowardly, or maybe just smart enough to know the wave she created was about to crush her. James Spaulding and Grace Tompkins sat behind a folding table, fielding questions with trembling voices, their scripted reassurances sounding thinner by the minute. Caleb stepped inside just as the shouting started. "You told us our deeds were clean," one man roared, red-faced and shaking a crumpled letter. "We bought our homes in good faith," yelled another. "You said the expansion was approved." James stammered something about zoning permissions. Grace muttered about working with legal counsel. Neither offered anything that resembled a real answer. Then someone noticed Caleb. The room turned quiet. All eyes snapped toward the man in the weathered hat and flannel shirt, boots still caked with earth. A few people looked confused. Others looked angry. But most looked terrified. Caleb didn't speak at first. He walked slowly to the front of the room, pulled a thick folder from his coat, and placed it on the folding table between James and Grace. "This," he said evenly, "is what you built your homes on." He opened the folder and revealed copies of the original deeds, inheritance transfers, and a notarized affidavit filed with the county. Everything was clean, legal, and indisputable. James paled. Grace leaned back like the papers might bite. "You mean," someone in the back whispered, "he owns the land under our houses?" Caleb looked out across the room, scanning the sea of worried faces. "Not just yours," he said. "All of them. From parcel 12A to 18C. All of Silver Ridge's northern section sits on Mercer family land." Gasps spread through the room like wildfire. One woman began crying quietly in the corner. A man pulled out his phone and called his wife. Another demanded to know why the HO hadn't disclosed the zoning issue before construction. And still, no sign of Karen. But Caleb wasn't done. He stepped closer to the board members. "You forged a land sale," he said flatly. "Filed fake signatures. Then you sold stolen ground to a developer who skipped every legal step required by state law. And now, your residents are about to lose everything because of your arrogance." James tried to speak. We didn't know. That was Karen's." "Save it," Caleb snapped. "You knew enough. You signed the minutes. You attended the meetings. And now you're going to answer for every inch of stolen soil." He turned and walked out, leaving the room in silence. Later that day, the lawsuits began. At first, it was just Caleb's, his massive, meticulously prepared case against the HOA and Palladium Ventures. But within 48 hours, homeowners began filing their own. Fraud, misrepresentation, financial damages, insurance cancellations, mortgage complications. The legal pile-on had begun. The media caught wind of the story and ran with it. Buried truth, developer, HOA built neighborhood on disputed land. Heartland heist. Farmer fights HOA over stolen heritage. Land war in Missouri. Homeowners caught in legal crossfire. TV crews showed up at Caleb's farm. Reporters hounded Jonathan for statements. Karen Holbrook? Nowhere to be found. Rumors swirled she had fled the state, or worse, was holed up in a cabin somewhere trying to shred documents. Didn't matter. The damage was done. Mortgage lenders froze every account in the disputed zone. Title insurance companies refused to back any property in Silver Ridge. New buyers backed out of closings, and current homeowners watched their equity dissolve overnight. And through it all, Caleb waited. He didn't gloat. Didn't show up to the news conferences or HOA meetings that were now held under police supervision. He simply watched. Then, when the panic reached its peak, he dropped the final piece. A formal announcement, distributed to every mailbox in the neighborhood. Notice of intent to reclaim private land. As the legal and rightful owner of the 300-acre tract encompassing the northern section of Silver Ridge Estates, I, Caleb Mercer, hereby inform all current occupants of the following. You are residing on private property without legal transfer of ownership. You may purchase the land beneath your home at current market value. Failure to do so within 60 days will result in eviction proceedings. The reaction was instantaneous. Some called him a monster. Others called him a genius. But none could ignore the fact that Caleb had just flipped the entire neighborhood into a ticking time bomb, one he alone controlled. The HOA was officially bankrupt within the month. Palladium Ventures backed out of Missouri entirely, fleeing to avoid the inevitable class action lawsuit. The board dissolved. Karen Holbrook was served papers on her front lawn by a county deputy with a television crew watching. And Caleb? He went back to work, sowing seeds, repairing fences, preparing for the spring. Because while everyone else was busy fighting to keep what they had built on lies, Caleb was reclaiming something built on truth. The land. His land. They had 60 days. 60 days to come to terms with a reality they had denied for years. 60 days to either buy the land beneath their pastel-painted dream homes or prepare to leave. Caleb Mercer wasn't bluffing. He didn't care about optics. He didn't care about press coverage or neighborhood whispers. The only thing he cared about was reclaiming what had been his all along and making damn sure no one forgot how close they came to erasing a century of legacy. The first eviction notices were sent the same week the HOA officially dissolved. Hand-delivered by process servers and mailed via certified post, the letters were clear and cold. To the current occupant. You are residing on land owned by Mr. Caleb Mercer. No valid deed of sale or legal transfer exists between your party and the rightful landowner. You have 60 days to submit payment for the land beneath your property as appraised by the county assessor. Failure to comply will result in eviction proceedings and foreclosure due to invalid mortgage security. There was no mercy in the wording. Caleb had spent too many nights reliving the threats, the fines, the humiliation inflicted by the now-defunct Silver Ridge HOA. They had papered his mailbox with arrogance, tried to bury him in bureaucracy. He wasn't about to give them gentle words now. The reaction from the community was immediate and desperate. Some tried to fight. A handful of residents pooled their resources, hiring a high-profile real estate attorney to negotiate terms. Caleb's response was short and public. There will be no negotiation. The price is the price. Others turned to the media. Heartless farmer destroys neighborhood, one headline read. Another tried to paint him as a rural tyrant seeking revenge against innocent families. But no spin could erase the truth. The documents were real, the fraud was proven, and the courts had sided with Caleb. Still, the calls came in. Mr. Mercer, please, we've lived here for years. I have 2 kids in school. Can we work out a payment plan? I'm a retired veteran, sir. I didn't know this land was stolen. Caleb listened to every voicemail. He read every letter. And then he did exactly what the HOA had done to him. He ignored them. Rules are rules. Some residents, those who could afford it, begrudgingly paid. They hated him for it, but they paid. At market rate, plus legal fees. Caleb's bank account swelled, but he didn't celebrate. He simply marked the names off his ledger and moved on to the next. Others weren't so lucky. Mortgages collapsed. Foreclosure notices went out. One by one, houses began to empty. Moving trucks came at dawn to avoid stares from neighbors. For sale, signs popped up, only to be taken down when title searches failed. And through it all, Caleb remained a specter at the edge of town, unmoving, unshaken, unstoppable. The former board members fell first. James Spaulding's house was repossessed after he failed to respond to the land purchase deadline. He left under cover of night, leaving behind boxes on the curb and a broken mailbox post. Grace Tompkins filed for bankruptcy. Carl Holbrook defaulted on his mortgage within weeks and quietly slipped into an apartment 2 counties over. But the real prize came when Karen Holbrook finally resurfaced. She walked into Caleb's office without an appointment, wearing oversized sunglasses and a mask of contrition. Her once pristine blazer looked wrinkled, her makeup hastily applied. "Caleb," she said, voice trembling. "I know you're angry, but we need to talk." He didn't stand. "You stole from me." Her lips parted, searching for a defense. "It wasn't just me. There were others." "You signed the papers. I didn't know the land was yours." "You had a meeting about it, Karen. You dismissed the zoning issue. I've got it in writing." She swallowed hard. "People are losing their homes. Families, children, Caleb leaned forward, voice like gravel. You think I didn't have a family? You think my father didn't raise a child on this land? You came after my legacy. You tried to erase my name and replace it with vinyl fences and mailboxes that all look the same. Now you're here begging for grace. Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't move him. Please, she whispered. I'll do anything. He sat back slowly. There's nothing left for you to do. She stood there a moment longer, defeated. Then she turned and left, the click of her heels the only sound in the room. By month's end, over 60% of the homes in Silver Ridge's northern section were vacant. Caleb began selling off the land beneath them, to developers, to investors, even to the same construction firm that had once helped steal it from him. But not as home plots. He rezoned the land for agricultural use, light commercial development, and storage facilities. Bulldozers rolled in, flattening what were once prized suburban homes. Strip malls took the place of cul-de-sacs. Fenced grazing fields replaced backyards. The residents who remained called it cruel, heartless, petty, but Caleb called it justice. Each square foot of land he reclaimed was a nail in the coffin of the community that had tried to bury him. And when the last moving truck rolled out, when the last HOA-approved mailbox was thrown into a dumpster behind the gas station, Caleb stood at the northern edge of the land, boots planted, arms folded, and watched the sunset fall over fields that were finally fully his again. The land had been stolen. Now it was restored, and he had done it without firing a single shot, just signatures, silence, and relentless truth. The neighborhood of Silver Ridge Estates no longer existed, at least not in the way the glossy brochures once promised. Gone were the pastel homes with their matching shutters and ornamental hedges. Gone were the smiling faces at block parties and the morning joggers waving to each other over white picket fences. What remained was a landscape of empty foundations, bulldozed lots, and the distant hum of excavators carving new lines through earth that had once been fought over like gold. Karen Holbrook was the last to leave. Her rusted sedan wheezed down the newly repaved main road, trunks sagging under the weight of boxes, her reputation crammed into the back seat with whatever dignity she had left. She didn't look back. She didn't have to. There was nothing left to return to. Caleb Mercer watched her go from the edge of his land, a solitary figure framed by fields of wheat slowly reclaiming the soil. The setting sun burned gold behind him, casting long shadows that stretched like scars across the land. It was the same porch his father had once stood on, coffee in hand, boots caked in morning mud. The same porch his grandfather had built, plank by plank, with hands hardened by survival. It was home again. In the weeks that followed, Caleb worked harder than ever, not just on the land, but on the vision. He refused to let Silver Ridge's story end with lawsuits and demolition. That wasn't enough. The land needed a new chapter, one that restored its purpose, honored its history, and ensured no one could ever try to steal it again. So he created something better. First, he partnered with a local agricultural co-op, leasing part of the reclaimed land to young farmers trying to start out, kids fresh out of college with big dreams and dirty boots. He helped them build greenhouses, irrigation systems, and seed banks. He taught them how to listen to the land instead of trying to conquer it. Next, he met with town officials. The same ones who once ignored his complaints now sat across from him at planning meetings, nodding earnestly as he laid out his blueprint. He proposed a new zoning initiative, the Silver Valley Agricultural and Conservation District, a haven for sustainable farming, local markets, and conservation research. The town approved it unanimously. Where once stood HOA-approved McMansions, there would now be orchards, grazing land, a farmer's market, and a small school dedicated to agricultural science. The community that once sneered at Caleb's tractors would now learn from them. Ironically, some of the former residents, those who had managed to stay, returned not as homeowners, but as renters or visitors. They strolled through the weekly markets, browsed rows of organic produce grown on what used to be their backyard. They never spoke to Caleb, but they saw him, boots in the dirt, hands in the soil, head held high. He didn't need their words. Their presence was enough. News outlets revisited the story months later, painting a very different picture than they had in the beginning. No longer was Caleb the vengeful farmer. Now he was a symbol, a man who had fought back against corruption not with violence or fury, but with patience, evidence, and purpose. A headline read, "The man who took back his land and gave it a future." As for the former HOA board, they were scattered. Karen Holbrook was knee-deep in litigation, facing multiple civil suits from homeowners who had lost everything. Her assets had been seized. Her name was tarnished. She worked part-time at a law office 3 towns over, filing paperwork she once would have scoffed at. Her husband Carl had filed for divorce and moved out west. Grace Tompkins had moved to Florida under a new name. James Spaulding had simply disappeared. Caleb didn't think about them much anymore. What mattered was what he had built, or more precisely, rebuilt. Late one evening, as dusk settled like a whisper over the land, Caleb walked to the northern edge of the valley. The wind carried the scent of growing things, rich soil, fresh hay, early blossoms. He passed the old windmill, now restored, its blades spinning gently like the heartbeat of the land. In the distance, lights flickered on from the greenhouse domes. The farmers were still working. The land was alive. He stopped near the old boundary, where once a garish sign had read Silver Ridge Estates, a lifestyle above the rest. It was gone now, its posts pulled from the ground, its frame burned for firewood. In its place stood a new sign, simple, made from cedar, hand-carved by a local artisan. It read, Mercer Valley, land that remembers. Caleb smiled. They had tried to erase him. They had tried to bury his family's name under concrete and HOA mandates. But the land had remembered. And now, so would everyone else. As he stood beneath the stars, a quiet breeze rippling the fields around him, Caleb finally exhaled. The war was over. The land was home again. And no one would ever take it from him. Not in this lifetime, not in the next.